In the heart of Anatolia, where the rugged mountains of modern-day Turkey rise above ancient plains, a civilization once thrived that few remember today. Long before Rome built its legions and centuries before Greece sang its epics, the Hittites carved their kingdom from stone and fire. Their empire stretched across Asia Minor, touching the edges of Mesopotamia and Syria. They commanded armies of iron and wielded laws that shaped nations, yet time buried their memory so deeply that for thousands of years they were nothing but whispers in the dust. It began nearly 4,000 years ago, around 1700 BCE, in a city called Hattusa. The land was harsh, cold winters, dry summers, hills scarred by wind and rock. But for the Hittites it was the center of the world. Traders and warriors came through the mountain passes, bringing goods from Babylon, Assyria, and the Aegean. In this crossroads of cultures, a small kingdom began to rise under a man named Labarna. His dynasty would ignite a power that rivaled the great empires of Egypt and Babylon. The Hittites were masters of adaptation. They learned from the Mesopotamians how to write, using cuneiform tablets baked in clay. They borrowed gods from neighbors, mixing foreign deities with their own. Their pantheon became vast: storm gods, sun goddesses, spirits of rivers and mountains. Each city had its protector, yet at the top stood one great divine pair, the storm god of Hatti and the sun goddess of Arena, together ruling heaven and earth. By the mid-1600s BCE, the Hittites began their first great conquests. Under King Hattusili I, they marched south toward the wealthy lands of northern Syria. Cities fell before their chariots. The Hittites were among the first people in history to organize an army built around the war chariot, light, fast, deadly. Drawn by horses trained for speed and obedience, the chariots thundered across battlefields with iron-tipped spears and composite bows. This technology made them almost unstoppable. Their power reached a peak under King Mursili III. He achieved what no other Anatolian ruler had done. He invaded Babylon itself. Around 1595 BCE, his forces crossed Mesopotamia and stormed the ancient city, ending the dynasty of Hammurabi. For a brief moment, the Hittites were masters of the world. Yet their triumph was short-lived. Mursili was assassinated soon after returning home, and the empire plunged into chaos. The next century was one of confusion and fragmentation. Rival kings fought for the throne. Cities rebelled. Neighboring peoples like the Hurrians pressed against their borders. For generations, Hatti seemed doomed to fade. Yet the Hittites possessed something few ancient powers did: a system of law and governance that endured even through turmoil. They recorded treaties, laws, and religious rituals on thousands of clay tablets, carefully stored in royal archives. Those tablets, buried under centuries of earth, would one day tell the world their story again. By 1400 BCE, the Hittites found their savior in a man named Suppiluliuma. He was cunning, ruthless, and visionary, the kind of leader who changes history's course. Suppiluliuma rebuilt the empire from its ruins. He reorganized the army, crushed internal revolts, and set his eyes on foreign conquest. His campaigns in Syria brought him into direct conflict with Egypt, ruled by the powerful pharaoh Akhenaten. The two empires clashed not only with armies but with diplomacy, intrigue, and betrayal. Suppiluliuma captured the great Syrian city of Carchemish, securing the trade routes that linked Anatolia to Mesopotamia. He then expanded westward, subduing rebellious vassals and building alliances through marriage and treaties. The Hittite language, written in cuneiform, became one of diplomacy's tongues, used even by Egypt itself. Yet Suppiluliuma's greatest victory would lead to his downfall. When the Egyptian prince Tutankhamun died suddenly, his widow wrote to the Hittite king, a shocking act in the ancient world. She begged him to send one of his sons to marry her and become pharaoh. It was an unprecedented offer, one that could have united two of the most powerful empires. Suppiluliuma sent his son Zananza, trusting in fate. But before the prince reached Egypt, he was murdered, likely by Egyptian nobles. The betrayal enraged the Hittite king. In retaliation, he launched a campaign against Egyptian territories in Syria, seizing land and captives. Yet the war brought a new enemy home: plague. Soldiers returning from the south carried disease that swept through Hatti like fire. Suppiluliuma and his successor both perished. The empire again stood on the edge of collapse. Still, the Hittites endured. Their resilience became legend. Under King Mursili II, son of Suppiluliuma, they rebuilt once more. Mursili was a warrior and a priest, a man who saw the divine hand in every victory and defeat. He recorded prayers and confessions on clay tablets, pleading with the gods to end the plague that had devastated his people. His humility and faith helped restore unity. Temples reopened, cities thrived, and the army regained strength. By 1300 BCE, the Hittite Empire reached its golden age under King Muwatalli II, and later his brother, Hattusili III. Their capital, Hattusa, stood as a marvel of ancient architecture, a city ringed by walls 7 kilometers long, with massive gates adorned by lions and sphinxes carved from stone. Inside, scribes filled libraries with records of treaties, myths, and royal decrees. Craftsmen forged weapons of iron, centuries before most civilizations mastered the metal. Farmers cultivated the plains with advanced irrigation systems. Diplomats managed a vast network of vassal states stretching from the Aegean to the Euphrates. In 1274 BCE, the Hittites faced their greatest challenge, the Egyptian army of Pharaoh Ramesses II at the Battle of Kadesh. It was one of the largest chariot battles in history. Tens of thousands of soldiers clashed near the Orontes River in modern Syria. Both sides claimed victory, but neither could destroy the other. The result was a stalemate that led to something extraordinary, the world's first known peace treaty. Written in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform, the Treaty of Kadesh established borders, alliances, and promises of eternal friendship between the two empires. For a moment, the ancient world stood balanced between two giants. The Hittites were no longer a mystery kingdom in the mountains. They were an equal to Egypt, Babylon, and Assyria. They ruled with discipline, worshipped with devotion, and built with purpose. After the Treaty of Kadesh, the Hittite Empire entered its final century, a time of both triumph and quiet decay. King Hattusili III ruled wisely. His reign was marked by diplomacy rather than endless conquest. He strengthened ties with Egypt through trade and marriage, even sending his daughter to wed Pharaoh Ramesses II, sealing the peace between their nations. For decades, the world enjoyed rare stability. Caravans carried copper, tin, and textiles between the empires. Scribes exchanged letters written in Akkadian, the diplomatic language of the age. It was an era of balance. Yet beneath the calm surface, storms were gathering. The empire was vast, but its heartland was fragile. The plateau of Anatolia depended on complex trade routes for grain and resources. When droughts struck or enemies cut supply lines, famine followed quickly. Worse still, the political system that had once made the Hittites strong, the web of vassal kings loyal to Hattusa, became a source of weakness. Ambitious governors grew restless. Provincial rulers began to act as independent lords, and far beyond their borders, new powers were rising. In the west, along the Aegean coast, small warrior kingdoms began to grow bolder. Among them were the Mycenaeans of Greece, seafaring raiders and traders whose ships reached even the shores of Anatolia. To the east, the Assyrians, once humbled by Hittite might, rebuilt their armies and dreamed of expansion. To the north, the Casca tribes harried Hittite lands, descending from the mountains to raid towns and villages. Hattusa stood at the center of this tightening circle. King Tudalia IV inherited the empire in this time of tension. He was a capable ruler who understood that survival required both faith and reform. He rebuilt the capital's fortifications, restoring the temples and commissioning new monuments to the gods. He expanded the great temple of the storm god, praying for protection and rain. Yet his efforts could not stop the forces gathering against him. Droughts began to spread across the Near East. Harvests failed. Rivers dried. For a society dependent on agriculture, this was a disaster that no army could repel. Archaeologists today have found evidence of severe climate change around 1200 BCE, a time when entire civilizations fell. Crops withered, trade collapsed, and migration surged. In this age of chaos known to history as the Late Bronze Age collapse, empires that had stood for centuries crumbled within decades. Egypt barely survived. Mycenaean palaces burned. Ugarit, the jewel of Syria, was reduced to ashes. And somewhere in the heart of Anatolia, the great Hittite Empire vanished. No one knows exactly how it happened. The written records stop abruptly. The royal archives of Hattusa fall silent. One day it was an empire, the next a memory. Some scholars believe invasions destroyed it, waves of marauders known as the Sea Peoples sweeping across the Mediterranean. Others point to famine and civil war, a society torn apart by hunger and rebellion. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps the gods themselves, long praised and appeased, turned away. When archaeologists later unearthed the ruins of Hattusa, they found blackened walls and toppled gates. The city had been burned and abandoned. Its once great temples stood empty, its archives buried under centuries of dust. The survivors scattered into the mountains, forming small Neo-Hittite states that clung to life for another few hundred years before being absorbed by the Assyrians. Yet the name Hittite disappeared from memory. For nearly 3,000 years no one spoke it again. To the Greeks and Romans who came later, the Hittites were unknown. Even the Bible, which mentions the Hittites as a minor people in Canaan, gave only faint echoes of their true legacy. By the Middle Ages, the empire might as well have never existed. The great stone lions guarding Hattusa lay half-buried in the ground. The cuneiform tablets that once held their laws and myths turned to dust in the silence of forgotten tombs. It wasn't until the 19th century that the Hittites returned from oblivion. In 1834, a French explorer named Charles Texier traveled through central Turkey. Near the village of Boğazköy, he stumbled upon massive ruins, cyclopean walls, gates adorned with carved lions, fragments of inscriptions in an unknown script. Locals told him the place was ancient, perhaps the city of a forgotten people. Texier noted its grandeur but could not identify who built it. The mystery lingered. Decades passed before anyone could decipher the strange symbols. In the late 19th century, archaeologists began to realize that these ruins did not belong to the Greeks, Persians, or Assyrians. They belonged to something older. Then in 1906, German archaeologist Hugo Winkler made a discovery that changed history. Digging at Boğazköy, he uncovered over 10,000 clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform, records of treaties, prayers, and royal decrees written in a language no one had ever seen. Slowly, scholars began to piece together the puzzle. By comparing the text with Egyptian records, they identified names that matched those of kings known from the Treaty of Kadesh: Hattusili, Muwatalli, Suppiluliuma. The truth emerged. This was Hattusa, the capital of the long-lost Hittite Empire. A civilization once erased had spoken again through the clay. Their words had outlasted their monuments. As researchers deciphered more of the tablets, the Hittites came alive once more. They learned that the Hittites were the first Indo-European-speaking empire, ancestors to many of the languages spoken across Europe and Asia today. Their laws revealed a society both strict and surprisingly humane. Unlike the brutal codes of Babylon, Hittite law often replaced execution with fines or compensation. Women held high positions in religion and even politics. Their queens were called tawananas and ruled alongside kings as equals. The Hittites were not merely warriors. They were thinkers, diplomats, and builders of systems that would echo through time. Their religion, too, reflected balance and inclusion. They absorbed the gods of conquered peoples, believing that every deity deserved respect. This openness created one of the richest mythologies of the ancient world, a tapestry of divine stories blending Anatolian, Mesopotamian, and Indo-European traditions. Even the Greek myths that later flourished may carry traces of Hittite origin. The storm god Tarhunt bears uncanny resemblance to Zeus. The dragon-slaying myths of the Hittites mirror the battles of later Indo-European legends. Through these echoes, the Hittites never truly disappeared. They became part of the foundation of Western civilization itself. Modern archaeology has continued to unveil their world. Excavations at Hattusa reveal temples aligned with the stars, underground tunnels for rituals, and fortresses built with precision that still awes engineers. Thousands of seal impressions show the complexity of their bureaucracy. The archives record treaties between equals, negotiations of peace, and even international marriages arranged for political stability. The Hittites were not just warriors but pioneers of diplomacy, the inventors of the written treaty, the architects of international law. Yet for all their brilliance, their story remains one of fragility. Power, faith, and empire could not protect them from the forces of nature and time. They remind us that every civilization, no matter how advanced, can vanish when arrogance blinds it to change. The Hittites rose from the harsh lands of Anatolia and built an empire of iron, faith, and law. Then they were swallowed by drought, invasion, and silence. Only fragments of stone and clay survived to speak for them. Today, As scientists use satellite imaging and ground radar to map the ruins of Hattusa, more secrets emerge. Traces of long-lost fortresses, roads, and temples lie beneath the fields. Digital reconstructions show what the city once looked like. Its gates glinting under the Anatolian sun, its walls alive with banners of red and gold. Each discovery restores another heartbeat of the forgotten empire. The story of the Hittites is not just ancient history. It is a reminder. Civilizations do not vanish in an instant. They fade, buried under their own weight until only silence remains. Yet history is patient. It waits for those who listen. For 3,000 years, the Hittites waited beneath the dust, their story untold. Now through the words carved in clay, they speak again. They tell us that power is fleeting, but knowledge endures, that even the greatest empires can be erased, but never completely forgotten. The Hittite story does not end with the collapse of Hattusa, or the silence of the late Bronze Age. Their legacy, buried beneath centuries of dust and forgotten memory, would echo into the modern world, changing the way we understand the ancient Near East and the very foundations of civilization. When archaeologists began piecing together the ruins of Hattusa in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they uncovered more than stone walls and broken tablets. They unearthed a civilization that had pioneered diplomacy, law, and statecraft in ways that continue to influence our world. Hattusa, once lost to time, revealed itself as a city meticulously planned and fortified. Its massive stone walls, some over 7 kilometers in circumference, were punctuated by gates adorned with lions and sphinxes, symbols of the power and prestige of the Hittite kings. Within, the royal palace sprawled across hundreds of rooms with administrative quarters, archives, temples, and courtyards. The city's layout, carefully aligned with celestial patterns, demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of astronomy that allowed priests to predict seasonal changes, festivals, and religious observances. The Hittites were not merely warriors. They were scholars, engineers, and visionaries of urban design. Among the most astonishing discoveries were the thousands of cuneiform tablets. These tablets contained legal codes, treaties, administrative records, prayers, and myths. They revealed an empire ruled not by arbitrary decree, but through a system of governance that balanced power, law, and religion. Hittite law often favored restitution over execution, and their diplomatic correspondences demonstrated respect for foreign powers, an advanced form of statecraft unseen in many contemporary societies. Through these writings, the Hittites spoke across millennia, their voice reaching into the modern world. Perhaps their most enduring contribution was diplomacy. The Treaty of Kadesh with Egypt, written in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform, stands as the earliest known peace treaty in human history. It established a framework for conflict resolution and mutual protection, emphasizing negotiation over conquest. This remarkable document revealed a Hittite understanding of international law and order, proving that the ancient world was capable of sophisticated political thought far beyond what was previously imagined. Yet the Hittites' influence extended beyond politics. Their mastery of iron technology had a profound impact on warfare and tools throughout the ancient Near East. They were among the first civilizations to smelt and forge iron on a large scale, giving their armies weapons that were stronger and more durable than bronze. This technological advantage allowed them to dominate battlefields for centuries and inspired other societies to adopt ironworking, shaping the military evolution of the region for generations. Despite their ingenuity, the Hittites were not immune to the forces that bring down all empires. Around 1200 BCE, the combination of internal strife, climate change, famine, and invasions, particularly by the enigmatic sea peoples, caused the empire to fragment and disappear. Hattusa was abandoned, its streets silent, its temples empty, and its libraries buried beneath the rubble. For centuries, the Hittites were a ghost in history, referenced only vaguely in biblical texts and foreign chronicles, their true identity lost to time. The modern rediscovery of the Hittites began with explorers like Charles Texier and later archaeologists such as Hugo Winkler. Their excavations at Boazkoi, ancient Hattusa, revealed the city's gates, temples, and archives. With the painstaking deciphering of cuneiform tablets, scholars reconstructed the language, politics, and culture of a people once thought to be mythical. What emerged was a civilization both familiar and astonishingly original, demonstrating advanced governance, trade networks, religious pluralism, and military strategy. Today, Hattusa is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, its ruins attracting historians, archaeologists, and tourists alike. Each gate, wall, and tablet tells a story of resilience, innovation, and the impermanence of power. Through these remnants, the Hittites teach a lesson that resonates across the ages. Civilizations rise and fall, empires vanish, but knowledge and culture endure. The Hittites also remind modern historians of the fragility of human achievement. Their disappearance illustrates how external pressures, climate change, famine, migration, and warfare, can erase even the most sophisticated societies. Yet their survival in memory, through archaeology and scholarship, shows that history is not lost entirely. It waits for those patient enough to listen, to dig, and to understand. Beyond their physical remains, the Hittites' influence permeates linguistic, religious, and cultural legacies. Their Indo-European language connects them to many later peoples. Their legal codes influenced neighboring states. Their diplomatic achievements inspired concepts that echo in modern international law. And the myths and religious beliefs of the Hittites preserved on clay tablets provide a window into the human imagination 3 millennia ago, revealing values, fears, and aspirations remarkably like our own. As we reconstruct the Hittite world, we uncover more than a lost empire. We discover a civilization that straddled the ancient and the modern, the human and the divine. They remind us that history is not only the story of kings and battles, but of ideas, innovation, and endurance. Even in obscurity, the Hittites shaped the course of human civilization. The empire erased from history is no longer silent. Through archaeology, scholarship, and preservation, the Hittites speak again. They tell a story of ambition and intellect, of conquest and diplomacy, of innovation and collapse. And in their story, we find a mirror for our own time. A lesson that greatness is fleeting, but knowledge can endure beyond memory, beyond the rise and fall of kingdoms, and beyond the sweep of centuries. Their cities may have crumbled, their kings may have vanished, their armies may have faded into dust. Yet the Hittites live on, in the clay tablets, the stone gates, the myths, and in the very foundations of civilization. They endure not as rulers of today, but as teachers of the past, whispering across the ages that even when an empire disappears, its legacy can reshape the world forever. The story of the Hittites is the story of humanity itself, a tale of ingenuity, resilience, and the timeless quest for survival. It is a story that reminds us that history is never truly lost, only waiting to be found. And in the deserts and mountains of Anatolia, in the ruins of Hattusa, the Hittites speak again. Their empire may have been erased from history, but its echoes will never fade.